Oh my goodness. There are very many F1 threads at which we need to pull in the aftermath of the madness that was the Qatar Grand Prix. And we're going to go back and forth. We will go long because there's too much to talk about, too much to dissect in a cheeky 8-minute video. So this time, this is you and me talking about it. A forum of sorts during which we will pull at all of the pertinent F1 threads. Of course, we've got to talk about Max Verstappen destroying in kind one King George Russell and the context around that. We'll talk about George Russell's response. So too will we talk about Lando no wins or Lando no risk, depending on your POV. And his penalty that he got, a 10-second stop go, too harsh? Or is it only the British biased media saying that? Did he deserve what he got, especially under the heading of what Maximilian Verstappen got only yesterday in qualifying, a one-place grid penalty? We'll talk about it in kind. It's important that we go back and forth here and now. Max Verstappen, first and foremost, destroyed George Russell post-race. And again, the backdrop of that is this. Post-qualifying, it was George and it was Max, and they went back and forth when asked about the incident, after which Maximilian Verstappen ultimately got his one-place grid penalty. Maximilian Verstappen said as follows: "What was I going to do? I had Fernando Alonso et al. In front of me and they too were preparing to go on a hot lap, hence why they braked with that vigour to get some clear track in front of them. What was I to do?" Max Verstappen said. "Where was I to go? So too, George Russell could see me behind him. So why didn't he adjust accordingly? Why was he looking to set him up for another Australia Grand Prix where he stacked it, yeeted it into the gearbox of one Fernando El Plan Alonso? This doesn't make sense. George Russell could see me." Indeed, Christian Horner said soon thereafter that George Russell did a bit of a Klinsmann, a professional foul, a bit of a dive with a view to get the other dude sent off, ergo Maximilian Verstappen. George Russell responded to that in kind, saying, "Well, listen, I had to go off. I had to avoid a collision. What else was I to do? I was preparing a lap. I was on an out lap, not a quick lap, but I was preparing a lap, and Max Verstappen came into my view in top speed. What was I to do?" Max said, "Well, how about..." And by the way, George Russell said he was driving to a Delta, which again makes you realise that this is a multi-layered onion, isn't it, as far as the automotive pugilism Rubik's Cube presented to these drivers. You need time, you need space in order to go and attack your lap. You need time and space, so too, to do your out lap, but yet and still you've got to meet this Delta. You can't go too slowly on track, but then you've got to avoid anybody on rushing. It's all techie, all very complicated. And again, you could argue that the FIA, the regulatory body of Formula One, have set the drivers up to fail in this. The race engineers need to be on their corn each and every single time, communicating oncoming traffic behind. There are far too many points of failure in this qualifying system. To that, George Russell said this. King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. He responded thus: "I was driving to my Delta. That's why I was going so quickly on that out lap." Again, doing a God tier one and leveraging the rules and regs against the other 19, in this case, Maximilian Verstappen. Max Verstappen responds, "Well, how about you just drive straight through us to stick to your Delta?" Insinuating, therefore, that the first order priority needs to be not having a collision. That if past this prologue, you will go into the steward's room, and if you can make the case that you needed to avoid a collision and then that was why you didn't make your Delta, then the stewards, utilising a semblance of common sense, will overlook that. Max Verstappen doubled down on that and saying, "Well, next time, if I'm in a similar circumstance, I'm going to try and get the other driver in front of me a cheeky penalty by driving up behind them, right on their gearbox, just as George Russell did me." Professional foul settings, dive in the penalty box settings to leverage the footballing analogy. And then we got the race, didn't we? And it was techie. And Max Verstappen did as he's always going to do. Don't make him angry because he's better, as if he needs to be any better to beat the other 19. When he's driving angry and he has that passion and he has a vendetta, it is almost impossible to beat that fella, for some say soon to be 5-time drivers champion. Again, Rewind a couple of weekends ago, and Brazil was it not? Driving angry. There was a vendetta, the timing of the virtual safety car. Again, he felt like the British biased media were against him. Damon Hill coming out and talking about Dick Dastardly tactics, that nobody can drive or overtake in F1 if indeed Maximilian Verstappen is allowed to run roughshod. Use those tactics, very fringe, Damon Hill said. And then what did we get? He triggered the beast that is Max Verstappen, and he came out and did what very few drivers in F1 history could do, and went from P17 to P1 in Brazil in 43 laps. What are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? Who does this? From whence did this Max Verstappen fella come? And again, he turns into the whole cry, if you make him angry. That drive in Brazil was by dint no a function of his feeling inside. He does it because of all of the adversity, not notwithstanding. And that's where it gets techie, because he's parlayed the same sentiment today, hasn't he? He said pre-race that he wasn't very pleased at the FIA, the fact that they demoted him because of what happened between him and George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. And it stands to reason, therefore, that you were going to get the radio messages that we heard in the immediate aftermath. Maximilian Verstappen said his trademark simply lovely. GP, his race engineer, said, well, you didn't drive unnecessarily slowly today, did you? Alluding to the reason, the fact, as far as the FIA statement, the reason why they gave him that penalty in the first instance. Christian Horner came over the radio and said you could have taken any of them whichever way you wanted, sir. And that has to mean something, does it not? GP then doubled down and said, you know what, if there's such a thing as karmic justice in this very unique F1 brand of automotive pugilism, then Maximilian Verstappen, you were handing it out. What was GP talking about? Of course he was talking about Lando Norris and the yellow flag, and of course he was alluding to the fact that George Russell, first of his name, fell foul of a cheeky 8-second pit stop at the hands of Mercedes. Matthew, you're a legend. Thank you so much, mate. Far too kind. A one-place penalty with the preferred groove of the track, of the racetrack, and he still beat you to turn one. Oof. I don't normally like to rant, but you are a clown, George, says Matthew Brown, legend in the channel. The difference between 3 wins and 4 titles and now 63 race wins. I don't hate it, mate. There is a difference. And I'd hoped I was buying into the George Russell PLC. I was drinking the George Russell Kool-Aid, hoping that he could stand up to the flames that a fire-breathing Maximilian Verstappen brings. How little did I know. Oh, ye of little faith, Cameron. Turn one, lap one. Are you having a laugh? There was no chance, was there, Jacob? You're a legend. Last of the late breakers. Who's going to be last of the late breakers more than Max Verstappen in November, December even of 2024? No one is your answer resoundingly. And that's why George Russell didn't even get close. Again, he made a brilliant start, didn't he, George? King George of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, first of his name. He was good off the start, launched it properly, dialed in the appropriate RPM. He was God tier. But then as soon as you get into the lead up to turn one and you're starting to prep your car for the combined entry, Maximilian Verstappen goes into a different world. Nobody on that grid can brake as late as he can. Nobody has that level of risk management, and that's why you see it so frequently each and every single time. When they go into turn one of lap one, Maximilian Verstappen just has that otherworldly feel, that different level internal gyroscope to feel where the grip and the traction is before he even gets to the turn. George can't do that, not with a full tank in the car. You'll recall a couple of years ago at Suzuka, full tank of fuel, monsoon conditions. Charles Leclerc had qualified on pole. Maximilian Verstappen went round the outside, into turn 1, turn 1A, turn 1B, as if it were nothing. No fear. Because again, he knows where the traction is. And if something happens, he has that ability to manage for risk in real time. He's painting the Sistine Chapel as far as his unique brand of automotive pugilism is concerned. Nobody else is singing from that hymn sheet. And that's why, post the Grand Prix today at Qatar, Maximilian Verstappen was fuming. He talked about the press conference specifically. the George and the Max interaction. Maybe George said, the reason why I'm 55 milliseconds down on you for pole in second, maybe it's because I damaged the undercarriage of my car when I was trying to avoid in inverted commas, says George Russell, the collision. Max Verstappen pushed back and says, well, why don't you just drive through us next time and cause a massive accident, the likes of which we saw end the life tragically of Gilles Villeneuve at Zolder? Why don't you do that if that's your first order priority, Maximilian Verstappen said. And George Russell turned around and said, I was driving to my Delta, mate, patronisingly tapping Maximilian Verstappen on his foot, and that's what got me excited. That's what got me drinking the George Russell Kool-Aid, because that's a very different mode of communication, a different way of interacting from George Russell as versus Lando Norris, who historically season 8 has been very subservient when it comes to his interactions with Max Verstappen. Yes, sir. No, sir. 3 bags full, sir. Yes, we're still best friends. Yes, I still respect Max. George Russell is a bit different in that sense. Love him or loathe him, as so many F1 fans do around the world. George is very different to Lando Norris in that sense. Chalk and cheese. And I think that will colour their relationship both on and off track going forward because of this. This is an interaction. This is an inflection point indeed of an interaction between King George, first of his name, and 4-time champion Maximilian Verstappen. Come always there. You're a legend, Hassan. Thank you so much. Too kind. Go on, let's get to the comments then, because it's techie what Max Verstappen said. Couple words, and he ran roughshod over George Russell, first of his name, didn't he? Here's what he said, and I quote, I'm very disappointed with George Russell. I've often been in the stewards in my career, but I've never seen someone who tried to screw me over like that. I lost all respect for him. In front of the cameras, he's neat, but outside of it, he's a different person. George Russell, I have nothing to do with that. Verstappen continues, in the world that we live in now, I'm not surprised anymore. I think it's the first time someone gets a penalty for something that happened on a slow lap. Go on, let's speak to that, because I was doing my own due diligence. Do your own research as you do. Maybe Max Verstappen has got this wrong. 17 times in Las Vegas a couple of race weekends ago, there were potential infringements like we saw Max and George happen in qualifying at the Qatar Grand Prix. 17 times, however, the stewards then did one of these, averted their gaze. There was no infringement. There was no grid place penalty. If indeed you're going to institute for a grid place penalty for that, you give them 3 places, right? Of course, the steward says that they were mitigating circumstances, that both of them were on cool-down laps, which again, nomenclature is absolutely incorrect. They were on warm-up laps, but maybe they categorise, as Peter D. Windsor said in his video, maybe they grouped them all into the same. Do you know what I mean? Maybe they categorise them using the same. It's the signifiers that are wrong. Cool down is a very different thing from a warm-up lap. Warm-up lap happens before the hot lap. So get it right, FIA, if you're going to use the proper terminology. Safak, you're a legend. Max is the opposite of George. Max equals honest, direct. George equals fake and sneaky. Do you know what I mean? Safak, I don't hate it. There are very many different ways to skin a cat if indeed you are an F1 peddler, as at December of 2024. But I thought, let me check Max Verstappen's math. 17 times it happened in Las Vegas. 0 is the amount of times, instances, that the FIA deemed it fit for purpose, for punishment. I say all that to say this. This is consistent inconsistency ad infinitum from Formula One, the regulatory body of the billion-dollar sporting enterprise that is Formula One. It is not good enough, therefore. Now, we know all of the craziness that's gone on in the background. Mohammed bin Salman, dictatorial settings, 1.35 million fund, presidential funds set up with a view to fund the people, the institutions who will be voting for him in December of next year. Surely, Mohammed bin Salman, do you remember that time when you accused Susie Wolff of leveraging conflict of interest? Surely, this, Mohammed bin Salman, 1.35 million's worth of presidential fund is nothing if not conflict of interest that you're looking to give the federations who vote for you in December. Nothing if not conflict of interest. Everybody's been sacked. There are barely any people in the world that they can appoint to these jobs that have the requisite qualifications. Now, some might say that all of this craziness as far as the stewarding that we're seeing, the consistent inconsistency, is by dint no function of all of the aforementioned, that the stewards keep getting it wrong because they don't get paid. Johnny Herbert says they get £300 per day. That is nothing to employ a former F1 driver. Johnny Herbert probably got more reporting, broadcasting for Sky Sports F1. Get your priorities in order. FIA Mohammed Ben Sulayem, jet setting all around the world on the private jet, expensing it, trying to expense it to the FIA before they asked you for your receipts that you didn't present. And then we can't afford to employ full-time stewards. This makes no sense. Jacob, it's bonkers. Something happened with the FIA and penalties. That, again, a big change. What changed? Well, Niels Wittich was sacked, wasn't he? As well as Janet Tan. She's gone. As well as Maya. As well as Anne Rout. There's been loads of key personnel that's left. And the reason why they're leaving is because they can't speak nor advise Mohammed Ben Sulayem. So the face of the organisation is changing. So too the audit committee bods that raised questions around the 1.35 million allegedly. They've gone. 2 of the 4 audit committee. The audit committee again is there to police and make sure that the FI behave. Gone instantly for asking questions, for doing their job. Bill Belichick settings, and I would argue, if we parlay back to the Max Verstappen circumstance, that the reason why they're so consistently inconsistent from Grand Prix to Grand Prix is by dint of a couple of things. The personnel changes. Niels Wittich gone. Now we've got Rui Marquez. Rui Marquez overseeing F1 and F2. Charlie Whiting was one of the god tier ones, and not even he could do that. But race direct for F1 and F2 concurrently. Charlie Whiting said, you know what, I don't have bandwidth. Let me alone. Let me just manage F1 by itself. So you're going to throw Rui Marquez in at the deep end, not just to steward and race direct F1, but to do F2 concurrently. There isn't bandwidth. Why are we so naive here? And that's why you get chaos. Carlos Sainz Jr. last race weekend, pit stop madness, debris on the track at Qatar, chaos. Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton fall foul of that. Surely safety car, red flag the race, whatever, double yellow wave, whatever. Surely do something. Effect for change in real time, lest we want one of these drivers to get seriously injured and all come to their tragic end, just like so many have done in Formula 1 as a sporting endeavour previously. Please, FIA, this is not a bit, not a drill either. I implore you to do what's right for all related parties. I'm seeing Lewis and Carlos struggle to get back to the pits because of them having run over debris. What's he on about? This makes no sense. Honestly, Mubashir, Eddie Jordan will kill the FIA. Absolutely, and as he should. Do you know what I mean? He should kill the FIA. Mubashir says controversy equals drama equals pounds. And again, Liberty Media are 100% invested in their bottom line. Hence why they're restructuring all of their subs with a view to potentially spin off Formula 1 and sell it to somebody very rich at some point in the very near future. But I digress. That's the reason why we're getting different stewarding decisions in similar circumstances across race weekends. And that's what Max Verstappen is saying. I've seen similar circumstances before. The qualifying instance where I impeded ever so slightly, quasi-impeded King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, and nothing's ever happened there. So why me, is what Max Verstappen's saying. Why me? Why now? In a world that we live in, says Max, I'm not surprised anymore. I think it's the first time someone gets a penalty for something that's happened on a slow lap. Max Verstappen continues in earnest, vigorously, fervently even. I didn't want to screw anyone over, and by doing that, by being nice, I tried to explain that as well, but I just feel like I was talking to a brick wall. I think I really spoke about valid reasons. I was quite surprised when sitting there in the steward's office, says Verstappen, with what was going on. It was very disappointing. We all respect each other a lot, of course. I've been in that meeting room many times in my career with people who I have raced with, and I've never seen someone behave the way that George did and try to screw somebody over that hard. For me, Max Verstappen says, I lost all respect in that moment for George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. Oh, the humanity. What are we doing here? This is Gonzo now. This is DEFCON 1 between King George and Maximilian Verstappen, 4-time champ. They are done. I like it and I hate it at the same point. I dislike the fact that George Russell is so acutely aware of the ramifications downstream and in the near term of politicking. It reminds me of Prost back in the day, right? 1989 with Balestre. That's the type of thing. That's the way that George Russell moves. He's head of the GPDA, etc., etc. I liked seeing him interact with Max Verstappen, facing down Max, because, lest we forget, he won't be able to beat Max on track. That is absolutely the bottom line. He'll need other stuff. He'll need to do this. He'll need to get in Max Verstappen's face, upset Max Verstappen's apple cart per se, because he doesn't have the natural ability on track. I'll tell you what it reminds me of. 2016, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. If I were George Russell, I would get Nico Rosberg on the payroll, on a consulting role. I would be looking to lift and drop if I were George Russell. Everything that Nico Rosberg did to upset Lewis Hamilton in 2016 and ultimately get the Drivers' Championship over the line, lift and drop that into 2025. He needs that stuff. I understand George Russell and who he is as a person. He's a killer. He wants to get that Drivers' Championship over the line, but he will need stuff. He won't be able to do it just leveraging his natural talent and ability, because it's nowhere near where that of Maximilian Verstappen, and so too Sir Lewis Hamilton, some would argue, is. And that's why we get the comments post-race. Remember, you will recall, Simply Lovely was Max Verstappen's. Again, revenge is a dish best served warm, some might say, and that will of course have fueled Giampiero Lambiase, Max Verstappen's race engineer, him saying karmic justice as far as Lando Norris and George Russell, both of them falling foul of their own mistakes. Lando Norris, the yellow flag, which we'll come to shortly, and George Russell by dint of his team's 8-second pit stop. Oh, the humanity. George Russell, Giampiero Lambiase doubled down and said, definitely you didn't drive unnecessarily slow today. Again, leveraging the wording that was in the official FIA statement when he got the one-place grid penalty because he was driving unnecessarily slow in qualifying. Christian Horner bookended the statements, the celebratory ones at the balls that are read, by saying you could have got them either side today, it wouldn't have mattered. Again, alluding to the fact that George Russell said that he'd had to jump out the way of Max Verstappen during qualifying at the Qatar Grand Prix. Oh, and by the way, George Russell responded, and here's what he had to say. The relationship between me and Mr. Verstappen, there are no concerns. We know Max is a fighter, George Russell said, and is very aggressive. I expected no difference. I really wanted to go out there today at the Qatar Grand Prix in the race and fight with Max today, like we could have done in the sprint. But yesterday in the sprint, he was probably 2 or 3 tenths behind us. So today, we were 2 or 3 tenths behind him. It just goes to show what a night can do in this sport. It's always on a knife edge, and it's such a shame that we didn't have the pace when it mattered. And I think George is right there. He didn't have the pace. But more to the point, you had the pace going into turn 1. This is the point that Toto Wolff keeps making, and the reason why so many F1 aficionados are speculating that Toto would happily drop kick in the chest George Russell or Antonelli if it meant he could get the signature for Mercedes of one Maximilian Verstappen, 4, some say, soon to be 5-time champion. That's where we are. Toto said this season, as recently as, that he reckons Maximilian Verstappen is worth anywhere up to 2 tenths per lap on average, as versus the other 19 on the grid. That's what we're dealing with. So too, he said that Red Bull aren't winning any races anymore. That car's not good enough. It is all Max Verstappen. That's how highly he and the other team principals rate this chap. Not bad, this Max Verstappen fella. He might go well if indeed he commits to having a career in F1. Lando Norris now behave? Let me have a look at this. My internet going on crazy. Let's pause for a second while my internet loads up and I can start responding to some of your chat. Jacob says, will Norris now behave according to the rules? The FIA changes every single time. What rules, Jacob? What are the rules? Do you know what I mean? Is there any been a stasis? Has there any been a set period of, let's say, 3 to 6 months when the rules haven't changed or needed to be amended or been implemented in a way that's consistent across all related parties? I would argue not, Jacob, and herein lies the problem. The personnel keep moving, the rules keep changing, keep being instituted in a way that is unfair across the board. Per Maximilian Verstappen today, or in qualifying, 1 place grid penalty for something that 17 people did in Las Vegas, only to not get penalised nor investigated. No, not even a whiff of a reprimand at the FIA. But again, this is a function of a multi-headed beast as far as causality, isn't it? Too many different stewards, too many different FIA personnel ahead of the FIA that cares not for any sort of consistency. Oh, and by the way, because this is where it gets techie, Max Verstappen said in his comments after he was asked, do you talk to Mohammed Ben Sulayem? Because it's all kicking off as far as the FIA were concerned. We saw you having a chat post Grand Prix, and Max Verstappen said this: I talk to MBS from time to time. We've got each other's phone number. He'll call me and have a chat. Conflict of interest, Mohammed Ben Sulayem. What are you talking about? How are you picking up the phone and talking to Max Verstappen? And then when we're talking about the GPDA statement, Mohammed Ben Sulayem has the gall, the plain-faced cheek to say it has nothing to do with them. Are you kidding me? What, because they don't have voting rights yet? This has nothing to do with the drivers. Are you kidding me? Surely if you are the FIA, your key stakeholder, your most important of all, will be the drivers, because indeed, as your very remit, the fundamental reason for your being is to safeguard the drivers and all participants of Formula One. Is it not? Have I got this wrong, chat? You guys tell me, am I misreading this circumstance here? Surely the FIA is the regulatory body of Formula One, the upper echelon of the motorsport. Surely its remit, first order priority, is to govern the sport and make sure all of its participants and related parties are safe. Maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe I'm being overly simplistic. Surely. So for Mohammed Ben Sulayem then to come out and say this has nothing to do with the drivers, it's gone too far now. I don't even understand. You need, as the FIA, to keep the drivers alive. They are the cash cows of the sport. Take away the 20 drivers, no one cares. You won't have yourself any Netflix series. The drive to survivation that F1's benefited from over the past 4 or 5 years goes away. Liberty Media's share price goes to pot. It's nothing. F1 ceases to exist without the bloody drivers. So how then, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, FIA, anybody else who thinks as much, how are we coming out and saying that it has nothing to do with the drive? Here's what needs to happen going forward. I'm going to put forth not just problems, some solutions here on in. The drivers need to have voting rights, and then Mohammed Ben Sulayem can't talk like that. Yeah, of course, the winners, the likes of Lando this year and Maximilian Verstappen, Mohammed Ben Sulayem will have his numbers. But how about the Albons and the Zhou Guan Yus and the Colapintos? They won't get a look in, and that has to count for something. This is why, Houston, we have a problem. Max is having conversations with Mohammed Ben Sulayem because he's the 4-time champion. But what about Lewis? What about any of the other bods? Clearly, Mohammed Ben Sulayem isn't a big fan of Lewis as an example because of his lifestyle. Because Mohammed Ben Sulayem says we're not rappers, that's why we don't swear. That's why you ping the bloody community service fine at Max Verstappen, and then Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, modern day journalese, doesn't get anything, gets a punitive financial penalty. There is inconsistency across the board here, and I dislike vehemently. I hear that many of you guys are starting to sack off Formula One, looking to dial out from it, cancelling your Sky Sports subscriptions in real time. So the extent of the distaste, the bad taste that all of this shenanigans leaves in your mouth, and I can't hate anybody. It upsets me because this is a sport that I love. I remember back in the day in the early 90s that I'd go to school and nobody talked about F1. I was a party of one. I'd watch the Grand Prix 94 and come to school and want to talk about Senna's passing, and nobody was watching it then. And that disappoints me, because this is the sport that I know and love, and I want to share it. I want to be able to have the conversations with you guys, go down the local Publican or Waterhole and have a conversation about Lewis or Max. What do you think? This is what the sport lives off of. Indeed, it fuels the sport going forward. So it breaks my heart. Piece of me dies inside when I hear that by dint of all of the shenanigans around the FI, the consistent inconsistency of policing, that many people are dialing out of the sport. It breaks my heart, ladies and gentlemen. But I say all of that to say this. Probably the biggest talking point of the Grand Prix, in and amongst Joe Granu and Checo Perez spinning out and all of the chaos, debris gate and the FIA doing what the FIA do historically, which is dropping the ball, not bringing out the appropriate double waved yellows or safety car or virtual safety car with a view to clear the track. That's all bog standard. If past this prologue, we should expect that level of consistent inconsistency from the powers that be. But the key talking point is this: Lando Norris, yellow flag. Did he get what he deserved? Did Lando Norris have that coming? For context, for those of you who didn't watch the Grand Prix, spoiler alert incoming. Lando Norris, towards the latter stages of that race, there'd been a safety car restart, etc. Lando Norris was brilliant off the safety car restart, all except for attacking Max Verstappen down the outside as opposed to the inside. Though I will contend, I will offer you this, that Max Verstappen was hugging, as he normally does, the inside, but there is a better way to attack him than to go around the outside. That's not the blueprint to get it done on Max Verstappen, though it was uncharacteristic, the snap oversteer that Max Verstappen had on the safety restart. I can't remember the last time I'd seen Max Verstappen make a mistake like that, particularly off of the safety restart, where historically, if past his prologue, Max Verstappen, 4 soon to be 5-time champion, has been impeccable, as near as makes no different, perfect. So then Lando Norris had himself an opportunity, but yet again he sees defeat from the maws and the jaws of victory. What are we doing, Lando? He's so frustrated, and he spoke about it, didn't he? He said that he effed up. He realised post-race that I don't know what I did wrong. He says, I'm not an idiot. If there's a red flag, okay, so let me set the context, lay the table for this. So, okay, notwithstanding the cheeky opportunity that Lando Norris declined, there was another piece, wasn't he? When bearing down on Maximilian Verstappen, the gap was circa 1.7 seconds. So you don't know how that's going to go, right? Do like Damon Hill did Michael Schumacher in 94 Adelaide and continue to apply the pressure, because you never know what's going to happen. Ultimately, that's Max Verstappen. And if past his prologue again, he doesn't respond too badly to pressure, notwithstanding what the Max Verstappen naysayers might tell you. But you may as well try if you're Lando Norris. Whatever weapons do you have at that stage? Strategy maybe, but we're talking second stint. 1.7 seconds is the delta, and then there is yellow flags going into turn 1. Post the yellow flags into turn 1, a 1.7 second delta between first placed Verstappen and second place Lando Norris becomes 1.2, 1.3 seconds. We called it live in the stream. Hang on. Lando Norris has done some F1 skullduggery here. Now, I know in karting, whenever there's a yellow flag waved, you do one of these to acknowledge that you've seen the red flag, so you can't get the black and white or the black flag, which would be an immediate disqualification. You've got to acknowledge the yellow flag. Let the stewards and the marshals see that you know and see and you understand the circumstance. However, in karting, everyone always keeps their foot buried in the throttle, right? Down in the footwell. This is an opportunity, if you're a karter, to bridge the gap to the guy or girl in front. Always, it's almost taken as read. Put your hand up, bury your foot concurrently into the throttle. This is the way that it's always been. Lando Norris did exactly the same, right? Hence why the delta went down pre-yellow flag, 1.7 seconds, post anywhere to the tune of 1.2. Ergo, he's gained nearly, as near as makes no difference, half a second because of him doing a cheeky karting move, right? But what he didn't do is do one of these. The equivalent of one of these in karting is to feather the throttle. Just a short lift, Just lift the throttle ever so slightly. This is twice now that Lando Norris has failed to do this. Baku, he had the opportunity to put it on pole, had the wheels, had the racecraft, had the speed. All that he needed to do when there was a yellow flag, feather the throttle. Austrian qualifying in the same year, Max Verstappen had the same instance. There was a yellow flag at turn 1. You think Max Verstappen is going to give up the lap because of a yellow flag? No, because he's a god-tier racing mind and a god-tier racer. He understands that there's a tax to be paid, and sometimes you've got to rub up against that white line, peek across it. Got to bend and break some rules sometimes if indeed you want to become a 4-time champion. Do you know what I mean? You've got to crack some eggs to make an omelette or a cake. And Max Verstappen understands that. Lando Norris is yet to get there. However, he's done it at the wrong time here, hasn't he? He had the opportunity earlier in Baku when potentially Niels Wittich would not have even noticed so many balls, regulatory balls and plates was he spinning for and juggling respectively. Now, however, now you've got Rui Marquez so keen to impress, keen not to suffer the same fate getting sacked as Niels Wittich did. Now this dude is a ladder climber, paying attention to everything right. Maximilian Verstappen comes over the radio instantly, so god tier is that dude's racing mind, and says, did Lando Norris lift? Remember, a yellow flag means danger, ergo you need to lift going into a yellow flag zone. Once you're past the yellow flags and you get no yellow flags or a green light, of course you're good to go. Full throttle, full send, 100% yet again. Those are the rules though. Into the yellow flag zone, you don't know what's happened. There could be anything going on. There could be a man crashed, as George Russell was, unable to escape from the car in Australia of this year. There could be anything. So you've got to lift and show the stewards via the telemetry that you know and understand there is danger, and then you can get back on. Full send immediately thereafter. Max Verstappen did it, hence why he lost up to half a second. Lando Norris didn't do it, and this is why it's techie. Ladies and gentlemen, Max Verstappen was keen to make sure Giampiero Lambiase, his race engineer, knew that he'd lost time during that yellow section. Max Verstappen could see in his wing mirrors immediately that Lando Norris was encroaching now on his gearbox, was closer to him now post the yellow flag section than he was previously. And what did the FIA do? They gave him a penalty. Lando Norris, penalty to the tune of 10 seconds, and not just the 10 seconds that he can carry on with the race and then absorb it into the time that it took for him to get to the checkered flag. No. This was a stop-go penalty needing to be served in the pits over the next 2 laps. Oh, the humanity. What are we doing here, Hassan? This is chaos. And of course, now we get into the British bias conversation, because JB on the internationally syndicated Sky Sports F1 broadcast does one of these. Oh my goodness. That is a super harsh penalty. How are they giving him that? Why are they giving Norris 10 seconds? Surely it should be a 5 seconds, a cheeky 5 seconds, and not a stop go, and not a come in the pits and serve it. Surely that's what JB said. To which Maximilian Verstappen fans responded in angst, losing their minds, therefore, saying, what are we talking about? British bias. You weren't saying that about Max Verstappen's penalty, his one-place grid penalty yesterday in qualifying, were you? And there is, of course, consistent inconsistency in there. Was it a harsh penalty though, chat? What do you think? Was it a harsh penalty that they gave to Lando? Could they have given him, if past his prologue, could they have given him a 5-second penalty? But here's where past his prologue goes out the window. This is not common law. This is a completely new team in Rui Marquez. Overburdened, overworked, underpaid, overseen by F2 and F1, keen to impress his paymasters in Mohammed Ben Sulayem, so lest he want to get sacked again and dispensed with, just like so many have done who've come before him. It's techie. There is agency. There's loads of different things, threads at which we need to pull if indeed we're going to be holistic and comprehensive as far as assessing this root cause pie. Lando Norris says, by the way, he continues, I'm not an idiot. If there's a yellow flag, I know I need to slow down. That's rule number 1. You learn that in go-karts, for Pete's sake. So why then, Lando, did you not do it? They will look at your telemetry and they will see it. How much did you lift up? And if you did lift off, it must have been minimal for you to gap over that section. Maximilian Verstappen to the tune, as near as makes no difference, of 0.5 of a second. That surely is your barometer, because you know Max Verstappen's only going to ease off. He's going to give you the minimal ease off. He's not looking to lose more time than necessary. So why don't McLaren even? I know Peter Windsor, friend of the channel, and we'll be talking to him tomorrow, hopefully. I know Peter Windsor will be pointing his culpability lens at McLaren. Surely they can do what we did over the stream and say, right, pre-yellow flag, you were 1.7. Lando, make sure that post the yellow flag, you are 1.7 again. Drive to the delta, surely. If we can do it here using a cheeky multi-view and looking at deltas in real time, surely Andrea Stella, Zach Brown et al. Can do it there, lest they wish to get a cheeky penalty. And again, I think this is McLaren dropping their operational competency ball yet again, as they've done so frequently this year. They're not ready for a championship. They're not ready to face down a fire-breathing Max Verstappen. They can't slay for that dragon. So too, they lack the goal congruence and operational competence, don't they? Andrea Stella, I think he's a god tier F1 mind, contrary to many F1 aficionados. I think he will get there in the end. But as at the 1st of December 2024, he's too green. The goal congruence isn't there. The singularity of focus. They're talking all this nonsense when Lando Norris finally is mathematically impossible for him to win the championship. They're saying their only goal this year was to win the Constructors. Are you kidding me? Do not look a gift horse in the mouth. Andrea Stella Toto, the boy who cried wolf, can attest to that, because he and they did it in 2021 when they divested out of their 2021 program with a view to focus on a new spec of cars in 2022. For the avoidance of doubt in F1, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. So Lewis Hamilton can tell you that, because had they not done that, he would be an 8-time world champion as opposed to 7-time. I'm convinced of that, but I digress. For some reason, Lando Norris says of lifting in the yellow flag zone into turn 1. For some reason, I didn't do that today because I've not seen it or I've missed it or something. So I have to take it on the chin. No kidding, Sherlock. They think I've done something wrong. I must have done something wrong. I can only apologise for the rest of the year to the team. So this is the problem, isn't it, as far as Lando's concerned? A lot of those points as far as the delta between him and Maximilian Verstappen for the current first place in the Drivers' Championship. If there's, let's say, 70 points now, or 63 points was the gap, half of that 63 points is by dint of Lando Norris's mistakes, lack of mental fortitude, not having the aggressive defensive posture off the line, failing to change up from first to second expeditiously, failing to dial in the appropriate amount of revs off the starting line, failing every time as near as makes no difference to convert a pole to a race lead as at the end of the first lap, not dealing with Max Verstappen the way that, let's say, a George Russell would do, not doing the mental fortitude Aikido thing and converting Max Verstappen's aggression into a weakness, as you'd expect a George to do, or as Lewis sometimes managed to do in 2021. Please see as your Exhibit A, the Brazilian Grand Prix at turn 4. Lando Norris has dropped the ball a gazillion times, and this latest one is the epitome of that. Maybe the worst one. You know that when there is yellows, if Max Verstappen saw the yellows, then you should too. If you didn't spot the yellows, then where is your race engineer over the radio telling you this, Lando Norris? I think what happened is that Lando did see the yellows, but he's tried to be cheeky, just as I and a million other go-karters all around the world have done. He tried to bend/break the rules at the wrong time, but this is by dint of his race IQ or lack thereof. Hassan says Norris knows and not contesting. Enough said. I think he's got to accept it. One of those that he's got to swallow. Max always needs to win. He does. He's a natural born winner. That's all that he's there to do, Starley, and I love it. I'm here for it. He understands more acutely than most the tax necessary, no requisite, to get it over the line. He's a get it done type dude. A driver equivalent to Fabio Briatore, let's say. Yeah, he'll look at that line. Will he bend and break a wall for time to that? Of course. Would he radio in that Lando Norris potentially didn't lift? Of course. Why would you not? This is not F1 snowflakery as at the 1st of the 12th, 2024. It cannot be. I think diehard F1, grizzled F1 vets don't want it to be. Why would you leave advantage on the table? That's Max Verstappen, not Toto Wolff. That's his remit, not Max's. What are we doing here? Kayla says, Lando has gained experience this year. He's never been in this position of a WDC before. Kayla, I hear you and I understand you. I think my principal point of contention as far as Lando's concerned is that he has to know that the windows of opportunity in F1, if past his prologue, and if there is a precedent that the windows of opportunity can open and shut. Who knew that Fernando Alonso was going to win his first and second and last, by the way, drivers' championships in 2007, 2006? I thought we were embarking upon the Alonso reign. This was going to be the Alonso era. So neatly and succinctly had he just vanquished Michael Schumacher, no less, into retirement. Michael Schumacher, the Red Baron, 7-time champion, and this young, hungry lion in Alonso, man from Oviedo, Asturias, comes in and defeats him. What, the Red Baron? What, that dude, like the proper original Reaganmeister? What are you talking? Alonso's going to dominate. This is the Alonso era, and we were living in it. And then the window of opportunity shuts closed, right? 2007 happens and Lewis Hamilton, a whirling dervish, happens. They fail to get their ducks in a row, dot their I's and cross their T's, does Ron Dennis, former team principal of McLaren. And then all of a sudden it's gone. Fernando Alonso, more than likely, unless Adrian Newey can build him a rocket ship over the next couple of years. That's it for Fernando. And Fernando is one of the goatiest once 2012 happens and he gets this close. But again, say all that to say that that's evidence, first-hand evidence, proof positive that sometimes the windows in opportunity in F1 look this big. Blink your eyes, and then all of a sudden they're shut. This isn't to say that you're not right, Kayla, that Lando can't kick on. I hope he can kick on, but he's been in F1 a while now. He's not a young pup. This is not his rookie or his sophomore season like Oscar Jack. He's been in here 6 years now. Who's to say that this might not be, when all's said and done, and that his career, the book on Lando Norris's career is closed? Who's to say that this might not have been his best opportunity? You just don't, there ain't no telling now. Hassan says, Gadoo. This year turned into LH cultist, into a Max supporter. Good GP, yeah. And Hassan, Max is making, look, I mean, as we round third base on this, because I wanted to go long and talk about all things Qatar Grand Prix, right? Look, Maximilian Verstappen, by virtue of his performances, by being so consistent, is converting skeptics into believers. That's the honest truth. Even Mama Cameron sometimes is confused at what's happening. She turned off the Brazilian Grand Prix, and when she turned it back on, realising that Max Verstappen was in first place, just nailing like purple lap after purple lap. My mum phoned me and she was like, what's going on? Said, Mama Cameron, you're witnessing Max Verstappen in all his brilliance. Do you know what I mean? Smashing out the purple laps, not despite the adversity, not despite Christian Horner misconduct gate, not despite the Rancor Red Bull, not despite Adrian Newey, but because of it. That's the type of dude that he is. He weaponizes these difficult moments and makes mugs. So you saw the other bods, the other 19 struggling to keep it on the black stuff, and Lewis was off, Alonso was off, Colapinto is yeeting it into the barrier again by dint of his maiden voyage in F1 and lack of experience. Therefore, you saw all those other dudes struggling. And again, this is just maths, right? This is counting at this stage. If indeed you respect the other 19 on the group, because they're not slouches. Don't get it twisted. If we were to get in a sports car and drive alongside a Latifi, let's say, to use an extreme example, Latifi would smash everybody in the chat, me included. And I've driven cars, do you know what I mean? And like I've raced. Like, not a fantastic level. Latifi would destroy me. Mick Schumacher, Mazepin, all of those buds. And so if you're looking at the best of those in like Lewis and Alonso and Charles Leclerc, and they can't keep it on the black stuff at Brazil this year, and Max Verstappen is going round and round as if it's dry. Mate, Jacob, you're a legend. Where is F1 going to? 11 teams, and who will watch? The veterans or new kids on the block? Oh, Jacob asking the exam questions as we round third. I will say this. I'm unsure as to where it. Look, I think Cadillac F1 joining is a good thing. An extra seat, an extra 2 seats even for young hungry lions. Potentially it would be hard to show Guan Yu and Bottas and Magnussen. They'll all be looking at that seat, do you know what I mean? Licking their lips. I think it's good news. I think GM is good for F1, more so than Andretti probably would have been, because Andretti did too much to cheese people off, did he not? Going up and down the grid, begging, no, imploring, stronger arming team principals and related parties, encouraging them to sign a sheet that said that they offer Andretti's support as far as their entry into. I mean, that's not the way. These are like millionaires. Do you know what I mean? Multi-millionaires, billionaires. I think in the case of Toto Wolff, you think you're going to go around with a piece of paper and force these guys to sign? Yeah, because that's going to work, isn't it? Good luck, Andretti. And that's why Michael, sadly, for all concerned at Andretti Global, he had to go. It had to be the name above the door. It couldn't be. Michael had cheesed off too many people. And to get into F1, as I understand it, with my very noddy B-spec F1 mind, it's an exercise in hearts and minds. Got to get out there and kiss some babies, do you know what I mean? Rub some backs, do some favours. Otherwise, how are you going to get support? Ultimately, all of those F1 teams, the team principals and shareholders, can veto you at any single juncture. So you got to gain their support, do you know what I mean? KYC, know your client. Go out there and get the hospitality on. Do you know what I mean? Take Christian Horner to like Wimbledon, the best tickets. Like that type of one. Rub some backs and kiss some babies. And Michael Andretti didn't have that in him. The knock on Michael was that he wasn't giving F1 as a sport the respect that it deserved, just like he did when he was a driver. Again, when he was a driver, he didn't have the best of times. And again, as far as that causality pie, there are many slices and it's too long to dissect as we round third. The problem is Michael based himself out of North America, and the oldest story in F1 history is that you're an F1 driver. You gotta try and travel the line of least resistance, right? F1 is hard enough as it is, let alone creating additional synthetic barriers for yourself. As an example, basing yourself out of North America in a formula that's largely based in Europe. So what, you're going to commute from North America every single time? What about testing? To base yourself out of Middle England, where the bloody factory is and where all the tracks are. Do you know what I mean? Especially in the early 90s, 91, I think Andretti was there, 91, 92 maybe. But that's where you've got to be. You've got to be there. You've got to be there. And Andretti was giving it the same disrespect now, trying to gain entry as a team owner as he was then when he was a driver, and his career was a catastrophe. His dad's career, very different, right? 1978 champion. Some may say that he was lucky that year, but listen, the record books are the record books, right? Women lie, men lie, stats do not lie. 1978, Mario Andretti was champion. So if it were Mario, but Mario's like 100 years old by now, so he doesn't want to be running around and kissing babies and shaking hands with Christian Horner. So they needed a new name above the door. That new name above the door is, of course, Cadillac F1. How did Andretti get it? How much did he pay Toto? Also, well, Andretti didn't get it, Hassan. It had to be Cadillac F1. It had to be GM. Everybody said of GM. In fact, I feel like the pushback on Andretti, in addition to them saying Andretti had more to gain than did F1 for their relationship, the symbiosis of Andretti and F1, I feel like one of the additional pushbacks was for them to go out and get a more reputable engine manufacturer, a la GM as an example. And General Motors, they were dying were F1 to get GM involved. And as soon as GM said, all right, then boom, rubber stamp Cadillac, then everything was go. It's techie. Remco says joy, and Alonso will be getting access to an. Oh my gosh, is Alonso over the hill though? Is he too old, too long in the tooth, too grey in the beard to take proper advantage of an Adrian Newey machine? Listen, if anybody can get Alonso over the line at the age of 4,300 years old, I embellish. Then of course it will be Adrian Newey, because he's the last airbender now. He sees airfly. It's got to count for something. Go and read his book and listen to the 1988 March 881 stories. That dude built a car in a turbo era his car, that Leighton House March 881, was super underpowered. Adrian Newey's story has always been leveraging aerodynamics with a view to overcome maximal velocity deficit, power output deficit. He was doing it then in 1988, such that even Capelli went for a turn so quickly that Alain Prost, who was following him, decided he was going to back off. Alain Prost got the message from his pits, like, what's wrong with the car? Why are you backing off? Alain Prost said, I'm not following that dude at that speed in that car through that turn. Going through high speed, long duration turns at ridiculous, like unfathomable, otherworldly speeds. Alain Prost was like, I'm not following that dude through that turn at that speed, because when he has the bloody crash, I don't want to be caught up in the melee. I don't want to be part of the debris. Alain Prost was so convinced that even Capelli was going to crash by dint of the speed that he was taking through that turn. Just completely sacked it off, backed off. That was an Adrian Newey car. Not a great one, by the way. Poor engine, lower output than the rest, not hot, not turbo, so struggled. But because of the Adrian Newey aero, the way that he would build into his car, mitigate for the aerodynamic sensitivity so that even Capelli could nail it, catch up on the other drivers through the turns, different graving. He's always taken that ethos. That was the dude who did ground effect in sports car in his thesis at university way back when, right? In like 1900 BC or whenever. I'm being rude. I'm being too rude. Styling lancing at Adrian Newey car is sad, as is Checo, mate. Are we going to talk about Checo? I think an announcement. They'll leave it to the end of the year now about Checo. What was he doing there? Look, forgive him his sins as far as the Colapinto start, because there was rhyme behind that reason. Even he wasn't being a numpty, as he has done sometimes this year. He was bit like there was rhyme. He wanted to go out and test, and he wanted clean air in front and behind him. But surely just go when the green light goes, go. But again, you could see Checo looking. But then he unwinds all of that goodwill, all of those people who had to apologise to Checo Perez. He unwinds it by just crashing. Like what? Okay, so some people say it's mechanical, but bloody Nora. I've seen that crash a gazillion times on Checo Perez. Just not... Sometimes your career in F1 is like a gaseous substance. The more that you try and grab it onto it, the more that it just slips through your fingers. Do you know what I mean? Just like the window of opportunity. Kayla, as far as Lando Norris is concerned, Norris is concerned, Max is incensed by the behaviour of George when they met the stewards. He will never forgive it. I know, Denise, he doesn't forgive. I was watching a documentary. I'll end on this because I've gone longer and not talked as much as I should have and read enough comments, but I digress. Look, there's a good documentary on YouTube somewhere. I can't remember the name of it, but it's talking about Max Verstappen in 2022. Lest we forget, this was post 2021 Abu Dhabi polemic settings, etc., etc. 2022, they built a car, if you remember, that was initially very understeery. So early on in the season, Checo Perez always has his success around his rear limited tracks, his understeery ones, Baku and bloody Monaco. That year was the year when Monaco, Checo Perez yeeted it into the barrier, put it on provisional pole, yeeted it into the barrier with the weird telemetry, didn't even bother to correct for it going into the tunnel. And they were like, Max was like, Red Bull were like, look at the telemetry. It's bonkers for an F1 driver to have a crash. Basically, he did what Nico Rosberg did, I want to say, in 2014. He did what Michael Schumacher did in 2002, I want to say. Knew that Monaco, he had provisional pole, wanted to end the session because Max Verstappen was going green behind him and purple. Yeeted it into barriers, what Checo Perez did. Shortly thereafter, I want to say post Monaco, it was Baku, and Checo Perez was getting ahead of steam up, right? 2022 this was, and Checo Perez started to talk the talk, didn't he? Yeah, I'm definitely in for the championship this year. After which, Max Verstappen said, Baku this is, Max Verstappen said, you know what, Baku, props, drove well. Monaco, though, that dude was skullduggerous. I was going to drop it on pole and therefore win Monaco. And Checo Perez yeeted it into the barrier. You know what, Max Verstappen said? That dude will never, ever beat me again this year. He will never beat me again this year. And Max Verstappen kept his promise because they went into Miami and Max Verstappen had a howler of a qualifying session. Perez, therefore, dropped it on pole. Perez's race to lose. You remember Max Verstappen chewed up the field in a race where there was no safety car, went all the way through the field and nailed his teammate for first place with time in hand. Bonkers. How do you do that? Traditionally, you'd need yourself a safety car, right, to give you a bit of advantage. You can't just side through the field from ninth or whenever and catch your teammate who's driving the same car and then drive away from him. What? Can you imagine if Checo had started from ninth and Max had started from pole? Do you think Checo would have come through the field without a safety car and caught up Max? You're joking? You're having a laugh? Max would have been in another galaxy by the time Checo got to him. And therein lies the proof positive that Max has the memory of an elephant and he's vengeful. He weaponizes this, not like Lando, that allows it to permeate his psyche and become vulnerable and, do you know what I mean, make worse his soft, vulnerable, emotional underbelly. No, Max isn't like that. He takes these things and he remembers them, codes them into his cerebral, weaponizes it and uses it to propel his performance in the car. Like, what are we doing here? No one noticed the wing. RPM did it. Yeah, no, I saw RPM's video on that, to be fair. Toyota, Haas, anyone? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Max, George. Max greatest, George is a duck. Who agrees? I think we need to put some respect on George's name. Is he skullduggerous? 100,000%. But has he got the minerals to potentially challenge? He's got to do a Nico Rosberg versus Lewis in 2016 is what George has to. I don't think he's necessarily got the natural talent. I don't think he's got the natural talent on track of a Lando, let alone a Max. But he has this other thing. I think he's quite Prost-like in his mechanics, the way he moves outside of the car, and even the way that you remember Baku many moons ago, I want to say a couple of years ago, the sprint race and the way that he raced Max. It's that sort of thing that we need if indeed you're going to strike up some sort of durable competitive relationship that can endure years, right? Prost and Senna type stuff. I'm not sure as at December of 2024 that Lando Norris has that in him. Like his comment to Zach Brown, yeah, it's techie. Let me read out this one and then I'm going to run away. Can we all agree that GR is no king? He's a squire who likes to lick his master. Oh my gosh, Attic, I can't read that out. For now, potentially. But if you go back and look, you only need to understand who George is. You only need to go back and look at who he was in previous Formula. The overtake on Jack Aitken to win the bloody championship, if I recall correctly, don't quote me, was just, it was Max Verstappen-esque. Dive bomb settings. Denise, you're a legend. Love your take on this, Cameron. Thank you. No, you guys are legends. I'm telling you, this channel will be nothing without you. I'm going to run. Thank you so much for joining. Longer chat than usual, but I figured there was so much to dissect for. I'll be doing you and the community that you guys have helped me build a disservice if we didn't come in and post-mortem for it. Diatribe. Been on the money, right? That felt quite good. You guys are legends. Same time tomorrow at some point. Mr. Windsor will be joining as per usual. Hopefully that comes out tomorrow. Between now, tomorrow 10 a.m. hopefully. If not tomorrow 10 a.m, tomorrow 8 p.m, of course, as per usual. You guys have been legends. I appreciate you ad infinitum in extremis. Thank you so much for joining and enduring my F1 rabblings. Between now and next time, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.